Today we're installing a Bushwacker pocket style fender flare, part number 20931-02. We sell a lot of these fender flares. These are really popular with the diesel crowd. This part number specifically, this fits the Ford Super Duty F250 and F350 single wheels, 11 to 13 models. Now, this is a really straightforward and easy installation, so there's no need to go in depth of everything here, but we're just going to show you a couple tips and tricks because we've installed so many of them on trucks. A couple tips and tricks that we do a little bit differently that you don't see in the installation. First off, the hardware on the pocket style fender flares, they are a T45 Torx. And these T45 Torxes, Bushwacker actually includes the bit for T45 in your hardware package. So on installing these actually come with a, a lock washer on them, but we actually put Loctite on these before we install them, and I want to kind of give you an explanation of an example of this. Let's run through the tools you need for installation on these. Your instructions have got you at number 2 Phillips screwdriver, ratchet wrench, 7/32 socket, 3/8 socket, 5/32 Allen wrench. Couple to add to it that we've come up with, T45 of your own. I like to use something with a little bit longer handle on it, just to get to easier and keeps me away from the paint. 1/4-inch drive socket ratchet and actually a 1/2-inch drive socket. This is for the back side of the hardware. So let us show you how to get this hardware on here. First off, this hardware, this is purely cosmetic on these fender flares. This is purely cosmetic. It actually serves absolutely no purpose other than for looks. And again, these come with a lock washer on them. Now this lock washer, I don't care what you do, how tight you get it, eventually this thing's going to vibrate loose. You're going to lose hardware out of the kit. Doesn't have anything to do with Bushwacker or the quality of their product. That's just the way it is. So what we do, and you just put just a little bit of Loctite on this bolt, and I mean just a fuzz, just a little bit. Okay. I'll actually take another bolt out of my hardware package, and I'll usually share what I put on one bolt with another one. That tells you how thin that I spread it. But anyway, bolt, and then a washer on. Then we actually put it through the fender flare. Okay. And then install our lock nut on the back. Now, when we're tightening these down, what we like to do is we like to make sure that we turn on the non-painted side, and that paint's something I'm going to talk about just a little bit. So again, T45 out here. Now I'm turning on the back side, which is the non-paint side, to keep from scratching. Okay. Now, when you receive your fender flares, they're going to come in flat black. We actually, most of the time, just depending on what the customer wants, but most of the time what we do is we match up with the paint coat on the truck and go and have them painted same color as what the paint coat is. So that's what we did with these. That's why these are a little bit different color, but when you receive these will be flat black. Okay, next thing that we want to show you before we get into the actual installation part of the fender flares is we're going to show you how to put what's your weather stripping, basically, for lack of a better word. This is very important because this stripping is actually going to create the watertight barrier between your fender flare and your truck fender. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep water from getting in, keep your fenders from rusting. After you put these on, you know, it's not going to be exposed to air again or exposed to daylight or anything. So you get the water in there and it can pool in there and it can actually cause you some rust problems. So what we use is a little bit of denatured alcohol. We cut it down with a little bit of water and just use a simple rag. And what we do is go around the outside edge of this with the denatured alcohol and the water, and we just want to clean up the edge side where the where the weather strip will actually attach, we're actually making sure we pay attention to wiping down the inside of this, because that's where our adhesive is going to be. Okay, so now we're going to give that just a second to dry, and we're going to come back and put our weather stripping on. All right, now we're going to put our weather stripping on, and this weather strip, what it has is it's actually got a square channel in it. Okay, this square channel goes around the upper lip of the fender flare itself. Really nothing special here. It's just making sure that the fender flare is really good and clean, so your adhesive strip actually has something to hold on to. So you can look inside of this and you'll see some red tape in there. That's actually our adhesive strip. What we're going to do with that is we're going to peel a few inches of this back. Now, we just want to start with a little bit here. And I've found the best way to get that strip is just use your pocket knife. Be very careful. Start it out like this. And I'll start out with just a little bit, maybe, I don't know, 8–10 inches. Okay, and starting on the fender flare itself, when you're putting it on, you'll just notice that the concaved side of the weather stripping is actually what's going to attach to the body. That's what's going to create our seal. Okay, so started with a few inches of the adhesive off. Just put the channel right on the lip of the fender flare and going just a little bit at a time. We're just going to apply that and make sure it sticks very good. Just taking our time and working our way around the flare itself. Now you're actually gonna be working. You'll start on one side of the fender flare, and you'll see what I mean by that. But I leave my strip actually in one piece. And nice smooth transitions like that, you don't have to do anything. If you've got a hard transition, if you've got a really hard corner, you'll have to make a cut in the weather strip, and that'll allow the sealer to make that bend or that cut. So now what I've done is I've pulled a little bit more of my adhesive strip off the backing, and I'm working my way down the fender flare, making sure that I get it seated flush up against the lip as I go. You can see that right there. That was a perfect example. It'll fool you. You'll think you'll have it on, and you'll go to roll pressure on it, and it'll just roll right off. So you got to really take your time. Be aware of this, because this is very important to your truck. This is going to keep water off of your fenders that can cause you a lot of rust there. Okay, so this is what we're just going to keep on doing. We're just going to keep on pulling a little bit of adhesive out, and we're going to keep working the strip up the fender flare, just taking our time as we go. Okay, so now we're going to get all of our hardware on all four of our flares, and we're going to get all of our weather strip on, and now we're going to show you how to do the installation on the truck. Okay, we're going to install our fender flares now. We're going to start with our front. Our front is really, really easy. What we're going to do on the front, on these 11 to 13 Fords, there's going to be 5 bolts that hold this fender flare on. You're actually going to reuse your factory hardware. There's 5 7/32 bolts throughout the fender flare here. There's 3 on top, 1 in the center, and here, and then there's 2 more inside of the fender well here. So we're going to remove those bolts and install our fender flare. Remember to save these bolts for installation. Okay, we've got our 5 bolts out for installation now. What we're going to do is just go back over the holes. The holes will have a little bit of mud in them because you can't get underneath of those to clean every time. We're just going to clean those up real good, make sure we get any dirt out from around the holes. Now your locking tabs are actually going to be on the fender well, so when you go back, before you go back, make sure all your locking tabs are lined up. That's lined up good. All right, now installing our fender flare, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the centermost hole and get the flare itself centered. I'm just going to step back and take a look, make sure all my corners are tucked in good, all my fitment's good. Okay. All right, everything looks good. We're going to loosely start the rest of our bolts. Two at the bottom on the fender well. Okay. Now our front one. Okay. Now we've got all of our bolts tightened. Now before I put my last few turns on it, I'm going to check it for alignment one more time. Make any adjustments that I need to make. You want to make your adjustments while it's loose, and then tighten down the bolts that you have to adjust if you have to make an adjustment. Like if I have to make an adjustment this back, if I've got a gap at my back, which I don't, what I do is I'd either push it in or pull it. Now your holes on the fender flares are going to be, you know, they're not going to be an exact tolerance, but they're going to be awful close to where you're not going to have to cut anything or make any type of adjust or any type of cuts or anything on the fender flare, so they should fit right up. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start back at the middle because I want my middle first. I've got it centered where I want it. Keep a little pressure on the fender flare as you're doing it. And don't strip these bolts out, just snug is good. Okay. Okay, Now I've got everything where I want it. I'm gonna go over and give it one more little tighten sequence again. Don't over tighten these. Don't strip those retaining clips out. And there we go. That's the front side fender flare installed. We'll go back through and wash that, but now we're on to our back fender flares. Okay, now we're going to install our back fender flares. Now the first thing that you want to do with this, the back's a little bit more difficult because the stock Ford fender flare doesn't actually have any hardware in it, but it already has pre-drilled factory holes in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our fender flare and we're going to put it up on the truck and mock it up so we know what holes we're working with. And that's very important because there's a couple extra holes in this flare, in the stock Ford fender. All right, so mocking it up, I know I'm here, 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 and that lines up good, and here. And basically what that amounted to is my bottom two holes aren't gonna be used. So now we're gonna put our clips on, and before you put your clips on, there's gonna be a piece of adhesive tape that goes on here. So even though we've got this clean, we're gonna go back through this with some denatured alcohol and clean this real good, because we're going to have some adhesive strip that goes on here. So we're going to just double check all that. All right, that looks real good and clean. Okay. We finished cleaning everything. What we're going to do now is we're going to put our clips in again. That we're using the 4 pre-drilled factory holes. Okay. Now I'm just going to show you how to put these adhesive strips on and then put our clips in. Take the adhesive strip and just line it up over the Ford factory hole. Okay. And then just bend it around back to the back side of the fender. And then your clip actually goes on with the non-hold side of the tab actually goes around the fender, and that leaves you with 2 sides of the clip that are actually going to be on the bottom of the fender well. This is where your screw is going to go through. So I've already got my other ones done. So if you've got any of these that are kind of sprung out, what you can do is you can just kind of pinch them and bring them back in the shape that you want them. And on your bottom ones are going to be a little bit tricky because they're going to want to slide on you, so you just bend them a little bit. You can bring them back to where they're holed. Or the other thing that you can do is your 2 top ones will be pretty well secure where they're at. What we'll do is we're going to go ahead and hang the fender, and then we'll put our clips in as we go. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, now that's got our fender hung. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to this other top one and line it up, which it lines up real good. And you can just finger start these number 2 Phillips screws. The number 2 Phillips screws in the kit's what you're actually gonna use. They come in the Bushwacker kit. Okay, so I've got my top ones hung there. So I'm gonna check it again for gaps. Make sure I'm good. We're going to be lining that, okay. All right, now back to the bottom clips. Now, like I said, your bottom clips where they're going to be down, they'll want to slide down on you. So again, you can just pinch those and kind of get the springiness back to them. Okay, put it right over the factory mark and puts the fender flare there, and that'll hold it perfectly. That's perfect. Okay, one more. Okay, there's our 4 upper bolts installed. Now we've got 2 more bolts at the bottom. Let me get my hardware and I'll show you how to do that, because they're a little bit tricky, but for right now I'm just going to go back over this for fitment, make sure everything's tight, make sure I don't have any gaps that'll let water get in. Everything looks good. Okay, now on to the bottom 2 holes. Okay, now we're going to do our bottom 2 bolts on our fender flares, and you've got 1 bolt here and 1 bolt on the front. Now, here's how the fender flare these fender flare bolts will work. What's going to happen is you're going to put the bolt with 1 washer through the fender flare itself, like this. This is a 5/32 Allen head. Okay, between the fender flare and the actual fender itself, you're going to get a spacer. Okay. Now on the top side, on the fender, you're actually going to have one of these large black washers and a locking nut. Now in the instructions they call this a 3/8 locking nut. It's actually a 7/16. So that's exactly how you want it set up. So this is going to be a hard shot to get here for you, but we're going to do our best. Okay, and once you have it assembled like I showed you, just take your 7/16 wrench, 5/32 Allen wrench, and tighten it up. All right. The really neat thing about that is that's going to let any water that gets in this flare drain out and go outside. So repeat that step on the front, and this is your fender flare installation for your 11, 13 Ford F-250 and F-350 single wheel truck.